I recently created a double page layout with the Take to the Sky collection, and I really enjoyed working with it. So I was inspired and found some more photos to go along with this paper collection. And in this particular adventure, we were up in Alaska riding the train from Anchorage to Denali, and the views were incredible. We actually treated ourselves to the Gold Star service, which was amazing, and I'll tell you more about that. And then here we are in the dining car on the train enjoying or about to enjoy lunch. So you can see the blues and greens and the travel theme is going to work with these photos perfectly. I do have some scraps. So we've got a couple strips of this paper, a few cut aparts, and then I have some strips of the matte paper, but I still have a whole one here. But I want to use this paper, this copper clay plaid, because I think it complements our skin tones nicely, but it coordinates with my friend's flannel perfectly. And I think it adds a nice pop of color to the blues and greens and grays. So I also have a brand new stamp set. This is called Scenic Adventures, and I'm going to be using the dies from this particular set. You guys know me. I cannot resist a set with pine trees because I just use them so frequently and I love having the variety. And there's a unique die in that set that I'm going to be incorporating. This is going to be a double page, and I'm going to add a couple removable glue dots to my mat just to hold these in place. So I just like to do one in each corner so my papers aren't sliding all around on me. And I am going to build this on white, basic white. And then like I said, I want to bring in that copper clay plaid color, but I don't have a whole lot of it. So I'm going to have to be strategic about how I use that particular paper to make sure I have enough of it to go across a double page layout. So for my photos, I'm thinking something like this. I did kind of play around with this off camera before we got started. And how'd I have that? This one here, and then these two stacked like that. So this is what I'm thinking. And I know for sure, like I said, I want to bring in this paper here. And I want to bring in the map paper, and then of course some of the greens. I don't know, it's kind of funny. It's like I'm hoarding this map paper. I absolutely love it, and I decided not to use it on last week's layout because I didn't want to cut into it. I have some ideas, but I think I'm going to save that one for more Ireland and Scotland pictures. So I want to bring in some of this, and then maybe some grays. And I know I want to embellish with pine trees, which are going to be green because Alaska, it's all about the pine trees, right? So I need to keep that in mind. I don't want to have, a large piece of green cardstock because then my pine trees aren't going to show up. So let's think, I'm thinking if we have a piece of cardstock across the center, I can cut this down and have a strip of it. Let's see, that is 1 3/4. So I could have just shy of an inch going across the top and bottom, and I could cut this and also go across the top or the bottom here. So we need to find cardstock for the center. Smoky Slate is a color in this paper collection, so that might work nicely. We could do something like that. Now my photos are just shy of 4x6. I actually print them with the white border, they're 5.5. So I can cut one piece of cardstock in half and get 2 6-inch pieces, and it works really well. So I also want to bring in the blue. What if we put a strip of the blue? Where's my little scrap here? We'll just use this one here to get an idea. We could put blue maybe at the top and bottom, and then have the gray. I think that might look nice, balance the color, and then we can embellish with greenery. I am just going to go for it. I'm going to start by cutting this piece in half. So I don't know how wide I want these. I don't know if I'll go all the way across or maybe just stop shy. Let's see if we had it fit our photos. We could go about, what is that, about 10 inches, 10.5 inches. And then I like to create you could go all the way to the edge, but sometimes it's fun to kind of hold it back. I think those just little stair step details add a nice They just add interest to the layout rather than everything being flush. So then we could do this, and then bring this one in here. So I've mentioned this before. One of the biggest benefits of having them just shy of a 4x6 is that you can half a paper and it still gives you color on the top and bottom. If it were 4x6, it would be the same height. However, the only downfall is when you want to use a 4x6 flip-flap, then these don't quite fit the flip-flap space. So that's just something, if I'm planning on using flip-flaps, I'll kind of work that into the design and make sure I make those photos a true 4x6. So I'm just going to tuck this little guy here and then see what this looks like. And I like it. This gives me a spot for my title here. And this will give us enough of this paper to run all the way across, even though we're working with scraps. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut these down, and I will be right back. It's really kind of amazing how far you can stretch little bits of paper when you strategically place them like this. So those are just shy of an inch tall. And again, I don't know how long I want them, so we'll place them overlapping in the center until I can determine where to chop them down. And then for the bottom piece, they are about 1.5 inches tall. And same thing, just going to run this across both sides of the layout here. This copper clay color is so pretty. It's really great for fall layouts too. For my matte paper, these are all 12 inches wide by 1. So we want those going across, bordering the top and bottom. And then I am going to ink up all my edges. Now I do happen to have this little gray granite Stampin' spot, so I will go ahead and I won't make you watch the whole thing. So I mentioned we treated ourselves to the Gold Star service. You got a little fancy pin, a collector's pin that said Gold Star, and then we got to have a nice hot lunch in this beautiful dining car. There was a full service like coffee, tea, bar up in our train car, and then we had these gorgeous windows. We were sitting up high and you had this like panoramic view and comfy seats. It was amazing. I have my paper layers adhered down, but not my photos in case I need to move those around. And I did go ahead and use these Scenic Adventure dies to die cut a whole bunch of little pine trees. So there's a set of pine trees, and then you have these little mini trees here. So they're so cute and tiny. So I cut a whole bunch of those, and then this is the die I'm particularly excited about. So it creates like a tree line border, and I'm thinking it might look really neat tucked across the top of this. So the way these dies work is they cut out the top but not the bottom, so you could put it on a long piece of paper. I only need a strip, and the same thing goes for the mountain ranges here. They die cut the top and they, put all this intricate detail in there, but leave the bottom intact to whatever you have it on. So there's a little water detail here. You've got lots of floral or grassy layers. This puts a little starry night sky detail in, and then there's the cutest little campfire. You've got a pair of little logs and the fire and more flowers, and then a smaller mountain range. So I am going to work with this one here. Let me grab my die cutting machine. Let me set this aside. I have a strip of Mossy Meadow, and it's 12 inches long and it's about 2 inches wide. So basically we just want to create a little border going across the top here. So let me just secure this into place, and then we will run this through the die cutting machine. I've got my bottom plates and then my top plates, and we'll run this through several times to go all the, the whole length of the cardstock here. I'm excited to have this little tree border die in my collection. As I said, I use a ton of pine tree stamps, so this will be a really nice embellishing option to give me some variety on my outdoor pages. Looks like alligator teeth kind of there. Now I'm going to line it up here to continue the pattern. So I'm just kind of eyeballing that. Let's secure it with a piece of tape, and then we'll run it through a second time. And I don't need the full 12 inches, so this might be long enough. I think it will be. So let's go ahead. Let me set my die cutting machine out of the way, and we will bring, let me move this off here. Let me bring this back into frame and make sure that's long enough before I commit. Yep, perfect. So now we can just snip this off flush to have a straight end. Now pull these apart gently. You might be able to use that too, but now we have this really cool continuous pine tree border. I love it. I went ahead and created one for this side, so we don't need the space, hidden behind the photos. So I snipped off a little piece, and then this will continue the pattern over on the left-hand side to make it look like one 12 by 24 canvas. Actually, let's scoot this out just a bit to match the other side. And I want to bring in black. So I have a piece of black cardstock to mat these two photos. And I do plan on bringing in black in my embellishments and my title. So that's why I chose this for matting these two photos. I have a train theme stamp set. It's called Greatest Adventure, and I am going to stamp this with basic gray ink onto a little rectangle of white cardstock here. I do plan on cutting this out, and I have to apologize. Sadly, this stamp is no longer available. It just recently sold out, and it's from, last year, so they're not bringing it back. So leave it to me. I bought it a year ago, and I'm just now sharing it, so I'm so sorry about that. But isn't that pretty? I have several train pages I plan to use this on. So I use my scissors to cut around this image, and now I'm thinking right here. I don't really want it over here because we have the train engine. So I want this on the right-hand page to kind of break up the two train images. And then let's create a little cluster by tucking in these pine trees, kind of layering them around the train. And of course, whatever you do to one side, I like to add that same element over on the left-hand side here. So let's just keep this going across the bottom. We have our row of trees along the top, so this actually creates that visual triangle of that lovely mossy meadow green. So I'm just kind of playing around with these to see if I want them all tucked behind the blue matte paper, and I think I do. I've got a couple tags. These are from the cut apart sheet in the Take to the Sky collection. So we've got a little open spot here. I'm thinking these might look really nice as an embellishment cluster. And then I have my alphabet a la mode. And I'm thinking for my title, Ticket to Ride. So I'm grabbing the alphas to spell ticket. And I like these because they're tall and skinny. So you can fit longer words, and have an impact, but without them taking up too much space. That is going to fit nicely. So let's go ahead and die cut those and from black cardstock. Fun little tip I like to do is adhere a couple pieces of cardstock together before you die cut them. Makes it so much easier. Then you have a little bit of dimension and they're a little thicker element on your page. And here's Dave saying hello. Hello, Mr. Dave. I only die cut the word ticket with the alphabet a la mode, and I'm going to use maybe the mini alpha die to finish off the title. I like to mix and match my fonts. I just think it's a really fun look and makes it more interesting. So here is ticket. I love to shop my stamp collection for embellishment options and discovered this one. It creates this little ticket. If you have this in your stash, it's called Admit One. You can see it die cuts a ticket and then you can personalize it with all of these. Now, my friend Janice uses this label punch all the time, which is still currently available at the time of filming this video. And you can see this edge creates a very ticket-like look. And she's finally convinced me I need this. And there's all sorts of fun things you can do, from just interest behind a label to creating like a background. But again, I have seen her use it as a ticket and thought, this would be a good substitute to capture that ticket look. We have this nice little open spot right here, and we can anchor that to the tags. And then I turned to my Cricut. I searched under railroad crossing. All of these fun images popped up. So I went ahead and die cut that, and I think that looks super cute. I still need to finish off my title, so using the mini alphabet die, I die cut to ride. So Ticket to Ride, and this is one option. And I went with just black paper. I love mixing and matching fonts, and I have one more option that I stamped out using a alpha stamp from my stash that might work also. So I'm going to try them both, and what I like to do is take a picture of each option and then toggle back and forth and see which one catches my eye. That's the easiest way to solve, which one's better. Take a picture and just keep swiping back and forth. So that's one option. I do quite like that, but I also used this Anthem Alpha from my stash and stamped out To Ride using Night of Navy ink and then just a strip of paper, and then I put a dovetail in it. So let's see which one we like better. And I don't know, I kind of like that one. They both look good. Either way, I think it would work fabulously, but I like that one. I'm going to go with that one and then just save these for another project. For last week's layout, documenting the Giant's Causeway with this collection, I had made some of these Cricut arrows. So this one was left over and I thought, well, we could use this, on the layout. So yeah, it doesn't quite fit there. We could put it up here. Oh, I like that. Let's put it there. It kind of anchors that train nicely. So I'm to the point in the layout where I'm ready to add my journaling, and if you look at the design, I really did not leave myself much space to tell the story. So I could use a little Avery sticker paper and add that journaling right here. I could, if I had 3x4 or 4x6, I could easily add that in a flip flap. So I did a little brainstorming, and really I think my best option is to make a pocket out of this photo and just pop that up on a little foam tape, and that way you can slide it in and out. You guys have probably seen me do that before. I'll put a tag behind a photo and then you can slide the tag out, and I try to make it to where it's at the top of the layout. So I could put a tag here, but this one's closest to the top and I use a top loading page protector, so I think that's going to be the best option. Stampin' Up! Offers these really thin little foam tape strips, so I think that's going to be perfect. And what I did is type up my story on a piece of cardstock, and this will slide in and you can pull it out the top. Now, since I have this nice, big piece of cardstock, what I did is added a few more photos. So these were photos that I really liked, but didn't print them because they didn't quite fit the layout design. And, we already had the train. I already had, both Mike and I and Bonnie and her husband. So I kind of skipped this one because it wasn't the best photo. It's crooked. She's not actually looking at the camera. And, so sometimes we have to narrow it down and pick the best photos. But since I've got that extra room, I have added them on the back. So I printed those on photo paper and then adhered the cardstock to it. And now I can create my little pocket. So all we have to do is add foam tape around the edge here. I spared you from that process, but you can see we have it on the left, right, and bottom, and that's going to support our journaling and photo, but nobody knows it's there. We need to create a little pull tab. So I have a punch, and I'm going to snip off the bottom of this tag because you can't see it anyway, and I think this will be just the right size. This is the label punch here, and if you can't, I need to grab a Post-it note. Just attach it to a Post-it note, and then you can more easily position that into your punches. That is just barely wide enough. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up the edges, and then we will add a fun little detail to further help the viewer know that there's something inside this pocket. This is also a great way to include your journaling if it's maybe more private and you don't necessarily want it front and center on the page. So this is going to sit just like that. I'm thinking I want it on the left-hand side. That looks good. So let's stamp on it just to make sure it turns out before we glue it to our card. I've got a tiny little stamp that says "This Story," and that is from Love This Moment. There's all sorts of phrases on there, details, highlights, the story, never forget, this moment, lots of different things that you could use. And then to also help the viewer or the, whoever's looking at my scrapbook and know that there's pictures on the other side, I've got an arrow on this same stamp set, a little tiny arrow. So we'll do that in the corner. And then there's a little camera icon, which will tell whoever, hey, there's pictures on the other side, and to flip this over. So I'll hold that up here in just a moment so you can see that. And then I think that makes it pretty obvious, right? Little camera and then an arrow, letting you know there's some goodies on the opposite side. So let's go ahead and use a little bit of liquid glue just so I can make sure this is nice and straight. Sorry, I'm off camera a little bit there. I'm just trying to get my head over that so I can make sure that it's straight. Since I'm using glue, there's definitely no repositioning this once it's set. Interactive layouts are always fun. We just seem to enjoy discovering extra little things to explore, right? So pulling it out of a pocket or flipping up flip-flaps, it's just a fun detail. I also have this stamp in my stash, and I use this ticket here. It was actually already stamped and in the pocket. It says Scenic Route, and I added a few gems around each cluster. Then we have our fun little journaling and more photos. I'm pretty happy with the little camera and arrow stamp on the bottom. That was a fun way to use those images. The Scenic Adventure die set will be available May 6th. You can see I added some twine to my tags, and I used this tiny little 1/8 hole punch, so cute, to punch the hole and then just add a little twine there. The Take to the Sky paper is low quantity, so that's while supplies last, and everything's listed in the description box below. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and if you're looking for more outdoor adventure layouts, definitely watch these videos right here.